Welcome back to Coaching with the Bible, the second century. I'm just kidding. This is episode 101, season 2, episode 47. After last week's big celebration, completing 100 episodes and cupcakes in the house to celebrate that experience. And I appreciate all of the outreach and people, sending me messages and notes, both directly and through different media sources, social media sources, congratulating on the accomplishment and wishing well towards the future. I really appreciate that. We now begin the next 100. Now, admittedly, I can't think about episode 200 or even episode 150. And for a few minutes there at the beginning of the week, I was a little bit nervous as to what do we do with the next 100? But I sort of had this idea, like I've always thought of, which is, let's just think of the next one. Let's go one to one, take one step forward, and operate in that manner. So episode 101, the third portion in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Devarim, known as Eikev. And our topic this week is on role clarity. This one gets a little bit inside the weeds, let's say, within the leadership space. But it's important not only for the people that are being led by that said leader, it's also important for the leader himself or herself. Clarity around role, clarity around purpose, clarity around job is vital for a lot of things, in particular success. And it comes up here in this week's portion in the 10th chapter, beginning with verse number 12. It's at that point that it would appear that Moses seems to, I'll put it in parentheses here, finally get to what it is that he seems to be wanting to focus in on and talk about throughout the book of Deuteronomy, which is, what is it that the people of Israel are supposed to be doing? What's their job? What's the role? And for a long time until this point, we've heard about some of their foibles and failures and errors and mistakes in judgment and all kinds of things that they did wrong. We've heard a lot about battles. We've heard a lot about the enemies that are on one side of the Jordan River. We've heard about the Ten Commandments. We've heard about the spies. We've heard a lot of different things about all those different moments. But finally here, Moses gets to, what is it that you're supposed to be doing? Last year at this point, in this particular space, we talked about mindset and establishing a certain frame of mind, a way of thinking, and a way of going about what it is that you're going to be doing. So that was about the mindset. Here it's now about the clarity around the role. And so here, Moses gets to it, and he says, well, Israel, what really is it that God is asking of you? But simply to fear God, have a sense of awe of God, to follow God's path, to love God, to serve God with all of your heart and all of your soul, to follow the commandments. Not a big deal at all, right? It's very small stuff. It's literally everything. It's really everything. What is the role of the people? The role of the people, clarified here on a very basic level, without getting into the depth, is fear, love, awe, cleaving, following the commandments, following the path. It's basically being, like we talked a little bit about a couple of weeks ago, or last week actually, being God's emissaries, ambassadors on earth. And if we were to come to the conclusion that it was too big a role for them, too large a task to handle, it would be understandable. Because it's a very large expectation, though. But at least on some level, it's for the first time, the beginnings, or at least it feels like the first time, of real clarity around what it is that God wants of us. What's our role in the world? What's the job description? And when we talk about clarity, we want to talk about clarity versus ambiguity. Because role ambiguity, not knowing what the role is madness. It's frustration. It leads to poor performance. It leads to a lack of accountability. It leads to people falling out. It leads to people failing. It leads to potentially anarchy and revolution on the far end of it, because that ambiguity just simply leaves people hanging in the lurch in the balance, not knowing what it is that they're supposed to be doing. Whether that was the people of Israel there, I feel like they probably had a good sense of it already at this point, because they just spent 40 years in the desert, 38 years after the spies episode, simply basically learning at the feet of Moses for all that time, studying the Bible, studying the laws, studying the commandments, learning what it would be to build, as we talked a lot about the term, the covenantal society that they're supposed to build when they get into the land of Israel. But it is now sort of fleshed out a little bit more into categories of love and service and awe and commandment and all kinds of things like that. That's better. Now we're sort of in a sort of a more what I would call verticals, top, up, down, as to what exactly the role is. What does it mean then now that I get the idea that we're talking about a sense of fear or awe of God? What then does it mean that what fits into that category for me? What do I have to do in there? Right? What's the description, the job description in that space? And now I know, okay, now I know I need to do this. Or now I know that I need to ramp up my skill set in a specific area so that I can be in a space to actually accomplish that. Right? So that clarity for the people is monumental. And it can be measured. In this case here, it's measured by how close or how holy perhaps a person becomes by virtue of the service and the work and the effort that's put out in the with respect to the people of Israel. Now, in the work environment, we can set up metrics for measurement as to how we know that a person is actually doing the work. I would challenge a little bit people here to go back to some of their teams and ask people, what's your job? Clear definition of what your job is. I would bet that people will come back with different answers. Some will focus on the tasks of the job, and some will focus on the results or the success of the job, and both are right. And it's really the combination of the two, perhaps, that gets to laser sharp clarity. That's a term that I saw that I really like. Laser sharp clarity around the role. And there's a really good responsibility method that I also saw, which I think really helps here. It's called the Rasky responsibility methodology. Rasky stands, R-A-S-C-I, stands for clarity around who's responsible, who's accountable, who has to be supportive, who can be consultative in this case, and who needs to be informed. That metric, that matrix of different roles in each thing gets clarity in the situation. So avoiding all the issues of lacking of support, or lacking of clarity in decision-making, lacking of understanding, lacking of differentiation and definition, here this metric, or this matrix, I think is probably the better term, around it allows for all those things to come in. Who's responsible? Who's accountable? Who can be supportive in this situation? Who can we consult? Who can be brought in? They're a consultant here. They're not a main player. They're a consultant here. Who needs to be informed? So who needs to be told everything that's going on? All that lives inside of laser sharp clarity for the role. And of course, communication between parts. So in the case of the people of Israel, let's say, so you had maybe the closest disciples of Moses, let's say. Those are the leaders of the tribes, perhaps, or the judges. Joshua, right, in that category. Maybe the priestly tribe of the Levites, they fit into a tighter space of relationship to Moses and the study. And then maybe it goes down a notch to that next level of household or person, or maybe it goes to age level, whatever that may be. And so you can see sort of how the hierarchy works, and the clarity works, and who I need to go to learn more, and I can build towards success. Same thing at work. Having that sense of real clarity around what the role is. How do I build that sense of high performance? How do I get people to be really at the peak really requires that sense of alignment. Are we aligned around what the role is, what the role isn't? Are we aligned around what are the musts of the role, what are the wants and desires of the role, what are the needs of the role, and am I the person to fill it? So let's get alignment around those things. Are we on the same space? We can get all visionary if we want. We can get it all the way out there, as far and as deep and as wide as the idea should be. But now let's bring it back. After we think in big, we want to act in the small. And now we want to put the steps in place. What is the role? How do we define that role? What are the 5 things, let's say, that make up that role? What are the skill sets that are necessary for those 5 things to fit into that role? Who needs to be part of the success in that role? How will we measure that success? Are we aligned on all of those different things? If we're not, then we're going to have problems. We're not going to know why. We're going to wonder, like, why aren't we getting where we need to go? Because we're not properly aligned around everything that's necessary for the role. The skill sets, the talent, the actual things that need to get done, how it's being measured, all that stuff really important. And then, of course, communicating around it. All that is important. But I would also tell you that there will be those with respect to clarity of role who are thinking in the big, who are thinking in the visionary. And that's how perhaps you draw people into certain roles. They're going to have to get inside the weeds and get inside the work and do the work. But what's enticing or what's inviting or what's drawing them in perhaps is something much bigger, much deeper, much higher, much wider. That is what's bringing them in. So the most famous version of that, and it would appear that it's not necessarily true, but it's a bit of apocrypha. Don't kill the messenger on this. But it's Ernest Shackleton's ad for those who are going to join him on the Endurance. So Ernest Shackleton is famous as an explorer of the South, right? The South, not the South of America, but actually the actual South Antarctica, and his goal to see and to actually explore the South Pole. And so famously, but perhaps apocryphally, he put an ad in the newspaper seeking out his crew. And it said, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Is that a job you're signing up for? But people did. People did sign up to go with Shackleton. They did sign up to go with him down to Antarctica on the Endurance to survey and explore the South Pole. And so they thought in the big, but they prepared in the small. And it was clear what everyone's role was to be. Now, the Endurance sank, but I believe it is the case that no one from the ship, from the expedition, in fact, was lost, that everybody actually returned home. But the concept is there. So you want to get clarity in the mission. You want role clarity in the mission, the big mission. What are we trying to do? You want to perhaps, with respect to teams, we want to figure out how all the pieces mesh, how all the different players can work effectively together, how all the processes can be efficiently engaged, what everyone's role is, what success is for person A, person B, person C, person D, where there's overlap, where they need to communicate with each other, how they're going to communicate with each other. And so as much as we're going to be out there in the big with Shackleton and the big, large Antarctica, or we're going to be there in the mass, that is the case with the Bible, ultimately then we have to get down inside it and figure out what the role is. Lay that out. As I always say, think it through all the way through second and third and fourth levels. All the different permutations and combinations and possibilities. Get really clear and really transparent with everybody around it and really communicate everything that's going on. And then you get the opportunity to have clarity. When you have the opportunity at clarity, then you have the opportunity at efficiency. Then you have the opportunity at success, and even far greater success than you might have even imagined. When the team is clear and the job is clear, then success is near. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week. Have a good one. See you next week in episode 102.